May 7th, 2015, continuation hearing of the Lewis County Zoning Board, appeals review of Lewis County zoning case issue 714, Pleasant Ridge Energy LLC, Pleasant Ridge Energy Projects. Michael Cornell. Here. John Ditson. Here. Rich Kiefer. Here. Diane Iverson. Here. Howard Zimmerman. John Huesman. Here. I'll note, Nelson, our chairman is present tonight, but in that case, chairman is here to observe that are already in the building. So, we can see him in the building. Morning, desire to see you. Yes, sir.
All right, I'll take this opportunity to welcome everybody here for our first evening together. Students let me know we have over 4,000 pages of testimony in this hearing so far. So, I guess we'll just keep looking for more. I understand that, Chuck, you have a few things that you'd like to go and present to us at this time. Why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay. Three things are going to be handed out. One of them is on the attorneys. The first one is going to be Lewis County Exhibit 12, which is a copy of a document from the commissioners of the Belle Prairie Drainage District. It goes to Lewis County government does consider the zoning development of our county. The topic is its own follow-up on our thoughts on the energy reply to our earlier communication. This is an issue that's kind of been ongoing for the last several months, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll pass that out in just a moment. And then on top of that, we have two different exhibits that are compiling the reports from our consulting engineer, Patrick Engineering. The first one will be Lewis County Exhibit number 13, and the second one will be Lewis County Exhibit 14. Exhibit 13 is the Patrick review of the application. As you go through it, there's some different documents, different dates, starts in November, ends with the last document dated on May 6th of this year. And so it has some different documents in there, but they all have to review the application, the sound system, etc. And Exhibit 14 for Lewis County is their review of the decommissioning costs for Pleasant Ridge Energy Project. For those of you in the crowd, we're going to put them up on our website sometime tomorrow. We'll have them up on the website to look at it sometime tomorrow. So be ready to see you tomorrow.
All right, Mr. Blake, I believe you have some response to some comment about that.
When the county does its presentation after we cover the story, there will be a presentation by Representative Patrick, who will then be available for questioning by the ZBA and other interested parties. The initial report is dated November 3rd of 2014, but it has been updated and amended as new information has become available. There are special reports concerning decommissioning and noise, with the last update dated May 6, 2015, which is why the reports were not released sooner. As Chuck mentioned, they will be put up on the county website tomorrow. Mr. Lukens, you have submitted a motion to allow questioning of Patrick Engineering Inc. representatives. My understanding that you're going to withdraw that motion.
Based on your representation, we will be able to ask questions, and that is correct.
Thank you.
All right, just so that everybody understands, this will be available on the website. The understanding is hopefully by tomorrow morning, these three reports that we're getting. So with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Blazer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll call MaRous.
Mr. MaRous, just a quick reminder, you still are under oath from your previous testimony in these hearings, so we don't need to go through that process again.
I understand.
Mr. MaRous, you've reviewed Mr. McCann's report and presentation. Is that correct?
I have.
And do you have Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 311 up there, your appraisal review report?
Yes, I do.
And could you describe for us, in the context of the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, what is a formal appraisal review?
Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice are basically the national appraisal rules. And under the rules, there's a specific standard for reviewing an appraisal report. And
describe for us, please, what you did with respect to your review and what your results were?
Simply, I read Mr. McCann's report. I was here for his first evening of testimony and observed his testimony. Obviously took notes. I was not here for the second night. I reviewed the transcript. I also reviewed information where he was involved in a webinar for the Appraisal Institute. As we did the review, we started basically checking facts and assumptions that were made in his report. And I'm not going to bore all of you with my 51-page document here tonight, but basically we went through his various counties where he had done the report, his various assumptions, and basically drilled down to look at the comps, the support, the analysis, and the basis of the conclusions. And in the report provided here, we have gone through and actually checked virtually every one of his target and control comparisons. We also looked at the published studies that he referred to, and in our report, or my report on page 3, I provide a summary of the conclusions and provide 13 bullet points and then kind of walk through the report. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to kind of quickly and efficiently go through and give you the conclusions and obviously available for questions. And I'm not going to go through all 13 because some are what I would say not as important as others. But when it all comes down to it, the conclusions, in my opinion, were not adequately supported, are not reliable, and are misleading. The first point I make is there was not really an analysis of market conditions in Livingston County, which obviously might impact property values, particularly in the periods 2008 through 2013, when virtually all residential properties were affected negatively by market conditions. There were many judgments concerning the effect of wind turbines that are not supported and require expertise outside of those as an appraiser. Mr. McCann is not a acoustical engineer, he's not an engineer, he's not a lawyer. Some of the statements and opinions really go beyond his analysis. And then I go first to Livingston County. The match pair analysis is poorly constructed and is misleading, and there really was inadequate adjustments and support for the 15 match pairs used in the study. Many of the significant factors influencing values are not considered in the analysis. I'll go through that as I go through this a little deeper. A similar conclusion was made for his analysis of Lee and DeKalb counties, where 13 matched pairs were provided. And they generally utilized matched pairs that did not have directly comparable to the target sales, including vacant land sales that were compared to single-family houses. The scope of the market value impact does not include reviewing the work of other appraisers. In my opinion, his report did not conform to the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. Conclusions from the Lansing study cited in the report are based on analysis of matched pairs that are poorly constructed and developed, are misleading and unreliable. The report also includes a study and graph and table from the impact study from the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. However, the data and the charts provided were actually again, I think a big factor goes to market conditions, which was probably the biggest negative factor on values during the majority of the time period. Zoning, in my opinion, was misleading. He discussed the loss of aesthetic values having an impact, which he can have that opinion, but there's no sources developed or supplied, and nothing that reflects he has the technical expertise to make those conclusions. The paragraph title, types of impact, which we've heard a lot, lead to sleep disturbance, health impact, shadow flicker, and aesthetic character, proximity to wind turbines. Again, no expert testimony to back that up. And I already discussed acoustics. And then in the conclusion, there really was no consideration or comparison of other large-scale agricultural facilities in the area, which generally could be considered an industrial use. And he also cites the easements and lease agreements with some landowners as support for this position, and there's really no clarity or explanation as to that basis. Highest and best use, I'm going to go through. Most of the land in this area is agricultural or rural residential. Again, I touch on some of the other possible uses, such as grain storage and confined animal feeding as other possibilities. And then there were discussions on developing single family and the suggestion of profit margins for single family development of 15 to 25%, having done several thousand residential pieces. All developers would like 100% profit, and many take less than 10%. So 15 to 25 in a weak economy, a weak market is really unsupported. Then on page 7, I go into Livingston County, and again I discuss market conditions, his analysis and discussion of foreclosures, and then go into some of the things that he really didn't discuss. On page 9, local market conditions, just as 2. Quality of schools, locational amenities such as wooded areas, rivers, and/or lakes, tax rates, zoning, total number of rooms, and number of bedrooms. Obviously, in the appraisal speak, there's something called functional obsolescence. So generally, a 3 or 4 bedroom house is what the market desires. If you got a 10-bedroom house or a 1-bedroom house, maybe with only single plumbing, that could be obsolescence. That wasn't discussed. Quality of construction, hardwood floors versus linoleum, face brick versus frame modular construction, architectural features, layouts, utilities. Do we have electric, do we propane, or do we have natural gas? Obviously, it's a significant impact. Air conditioning, central air, type and sizes of garages, type and sizes of outbuildings, gravel or paved drives, paddocks and other site improvements, electric fences, and/or electric fences and no fences. So I go through and basically analyze each of the matched pairs. I also discuss on page 11 an issue of marketing time, with the alleging that the marketing time for the areas within the wind farm footprint are higher than outside. And on page 11, it kind of shows the flaws in that information, that it's inconsistent, it's up some years and it's down others. So again, page 12, I go into Livingston County analysis with the matched pairs. Probably on page 13, this is a good example. It's in Flanagan, which was on on East Road in Flanagan. This property was allegedly impacted by turbines, and it turns out as I go through the whole analysis that I actually have a letter from Joan Board Realty, who handled the transaction, and stated that the buyer that had paid $143,000 had financial difficulties. There was trouble and were financial issues, and when the property went on the market, when the inspection was done, the basement was flooded. There was a mattress floating in the basement. There was evidence of mold, and it was really the conditional issues rather than the impact of the turbines. And that's outlined in our report on page 13. As we go through 13 and going through 17 of his examples, and in each one I provide indications of information that was incorrect or lacking, and I have brought backup data here, but I provided a pretty detailed summary for each one. And what we found were considerable inconsistencies that did not, were supported diminution in value, but not to the existence of a wind farm. So really, in conclusion, there wasn't support for his allegation of diminution in Livingston County. Page 25, I provide some additional information. Page 26, I provide a detailed analysis of Lee and DeKalb counties. And page 28 is interesting on Lee County, where his pair number one target sale on Lee Road was a house constructed in 1886. Subsequent to the sale, the house was demolished. It was a land sale, and was considered as an improved property. And in my opinion, it should not be compared with an updated, remodeled farmhouse. Then, moving along, DeKalb, similar conclusions, and again provided in significant detail. Page 36, I go into the literature review that he cited. Some were labeled independent, some were wind industry funded, some were funded privately, some were funded publicly. There's reference to various appraisers, and again, I provided some comments and conclusions there, particularly the Lansing study on page 37. 38 is the impact study, and when he did his chart on page 53 of his report, he apparently appeared to pull out on page 18 of the impact study, except where the impact study used information that are median assessed values, which that means the assessor's opinion, and then it was so stated as median sales. They're two totally different data sets, and that basically contaminated the whole analysis. There's more information on here in regard to his use of that study. PowerPoint presentation, he pretty much summarized what I've gone through. Then he also had a Lee County sale, or Lee County study, that's on page 40 of my report, and he basically lumps in sales from 203, 204, and early 205. Actually, the market was going up at that time. And then there was issues between small lot subdivisions and acreage pieces and some of the comparables had significant site amenities such as ponds and river were not taken into consideration in his analysis. I go through again on page 41 discussing the issues with house age and size. I then touch on page 42, analysis of the Van Wert County, Ohio study. Again, no data were provided local economic conditions. I went into the farmhouse value diminution and provided conclusions there. And then really on page 45 and 46, I provide my bullet point conclusions and what I found.
Just one quick follow-up. You mentioned the house in Flanagan on East Road. You recall that Mr. McCann testified and also indicated in his report and his presentation that the third sale, if you remember, he was talking about 3 sales of that house in about a 2.5-year period.
Yes.
All right. And you recall that he indicated that the third sale, which occurred in February 2012, also the value went down from the second sale, and he attributed that exclusively to the presence of the Mountain Wind Farm. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And was the Mountain Wind Farm, in fact, in existence in February 2012?
No, it was not.
When did that project begin construction?
Several months later.
Moving from that report, if you're aware, I think you mentioned earlier, Mr. McCann spoke about what he called a seminar that he presented to the Appraisal Institute.
Yes.
And Mr. McCann said that the Appraisal Institute had peer-reviewed his presentation. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And does the Appraisal Institute, in fact, peer-review presentations like that?
They do not, and I further contacted Barton DeLacy, D-E-L-A-C-Y-M-A-I, Council of Real Estate, who was the co-presenter, and he said that they did not peer review that seminar.
Did the Appraisal Institute do anything in reaction to Mr. McCann's presentation?
Yes. There was some negative reaction as to bias, and they actually put on another wind farm seminar called Wind Turbine Effects on Value in March of 2015.
That might be a hint. All right, Mr. MaRous, I handed you what the Marcus presented 333. Is this the description of the webinar that you put on March 5th of this year?
Yes, it is.
And it indicates that the presenters are Thomas Jackson and Ben Hone.
Correct.
And you're aware that they're 2 of the authors of the 2013 Lawrence Berkeley real estate study?
Yes. I am. I did also watch the seminar, the webinar.
All right, let's turn for a moment to the topic of transmission lines, which was a topic of testimony in this hearing in January. Have you personally done work in the area of determining impacts on property values from transmission lines?
Yes, in the last 5 years, I've been involved in at least 5 major condemnation cases, working for property owners. Properties were either taken or impacted by major transmission lines. One was in Bloomington, Normal, for a 500-unit manufactured home community that cut through through actually part of their land. Another was outside of Milwaukee, they went through a $20 million office complex and cut through their stormwater management. And 3 others were in Huntley, Illinois, that were all 3 fires in the 100 to 150 acre size range. One, the ComEd proposed right away was going to go along the whole side of an elevation and then cut across the front edge. The other 2, the ComEd right away was going to cut across the front edge.
So these were all cases where you were representing property owners who were concerned that their property value would be impacted by the transmission lines?
Yes, and one has gone through a jury trial. 3 of them have had depositions, and the other 2 settled at multiple significantly above the offer by the utility company.
And what have you concluded with respect to transmission line impacts based on your work in that area?
The bottom line is proximity is the negative impact on value. It depends how it affects the property, but doing research, there's significant amount of power company, ComEd and others, that have funded research that show no diminution of value is about the same that showed diminution of value. It seems that clearly the higher the value of the home, 400,000 plus, it's a bigger impact. What seems to be clear is the width of the right-of-way, number 1. And ComEd in Illinois is generally only taking a 60-foot right-of-way for a pole that can be 60 to 90 feet high, which in my opinion is just not wide enough. And the other is the distance from the property. And the conclusion that I found is that within 200 to 300 feet, that first 200 to 300 feet of land adjoining that right-of-way has a negative impact on value. After that point, it seems to be de minimis. It's clearly a bigger issue with higher value assets. And if you get into more density, and there's a classic example along the Northwest Tollway in Hoffman Estates, where they got a power transmission station, and they've got lines going on one side of it and on the other, and around the tollway. And because it's a convenient location, the house is sold, but the house is adjoining within 200 feet. They generally got bigger buffer rather than give them a discount. Instead of 125-foot backyard, they give them a 200-foot backyard. And, you know, and in each situation, ComEd would always make the point that there's no damages. But in my opinion, there are, if you're close. So the first 200 to 300 feet, my opinions were generally the value was half. So if you got $10,000 per acre property in the first 300 feet, it's probably worth $5,000 an acre. And it was fought, it was argued, but the one jury trial pretty much upheld my opinion, and the other, obviously significant support was provided by the utility company because they provided damages to those conclusions.
So if you're over 300 feet away from if the transmission line is over 300 feet away from the residence, in your opinion, based on your study, does that impact dissipate or disappear?
It doesn't impact because there's power lines all over. And it's just a natural need. And in Illinois, most are above ground because they're a lot less expensive to install. But over 200 to 300 feet, in my opinion, there's nothing supportable that reflects an impact on that.
Let's turn now to the material that Mr. Steiger produced. In his opinion, that the Cayuga Ridge Wind Farm and the Deer Run Wind Farm have negatively impacted property values in that area of Livingston County. First, you're aware that he used information from the county assessor?
Yes.
And is there an accepted methodology for using assessment information information or assessor information for a mass appraisal?
Yes, there's a standard on mass appraisal by the International Association of Assessing Officers,
And
which I
that's,
think is Exhibit 184.
thank you, Liz. And just for the record, Mr. Cornell, that's an exhibit that was distributed quite a while, I think, during my cross-exam with Mr. Steiger quite some time ago. Based on your review of what Mr. Steiger did, including his testimony, did he follow any of the requirements in the appraisal or assessor association standard?
No, I think he did research, but as far as completely following the research, he did not. He's not a licensed appraiser. He's not an assessor. He did not follow the standards of mass appraisal.
Are there other deficiencies in Mr. Steiger's report besides that?
Very briefly, on page 3 of the top paragraph, there's a reference, the grouping data together by geography does not always mean the data is applicable to similar locations. I mean, this is location, location, location when you're valuing real estate. And, again, you can have disparities or significant differences in value between two adjoining communities based on the quality of their schools, the quality of their economic vitality, their jobs, their tax base, their infrastructure, their city services. And then there is basically the averaging, and where that becomes problematic. Again, you have two houses, one sells for 135, one sells for 155, the average is 145. However, you can also have a $95,000 house and a $195,000 house, and bingo, you got $145,000. And probably the buyer of the house, $95,000 buyer, is probably not going to buy the $195,000 house. Again, there doesn't seem to be any impact or discussion of the issues of the economic conditions that transpired, again, between 2008 and 2013. And those were generally my comments on that. Some of the sources, I didn't know where it was coming from, but I think he was attempting to provide some conclusions based on information when he did research. And I realized he was a well-proactive individual.
And do you have an opinion regarding the validity of his conclusions?
I think they're valid as personal opinions, but not professional opinions.
Now, you're aware that when he testified, Mr. Steiger talked about what he believed was the potential impact of wind farms in other counties.
Yes.
Let's turn to another report that you prepared, and that's Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 312. If you have that there.
The assessed valuation study? Yes.
And you're aware also that Mr. McCann said that he testified to this in February, that interviews of assessors aren't useful in determining impacts on property values. You recall that testimony?
Yes.
Do you agree with that statement?
I do not, and actually his co-presenter, Barton Lacey, in his webinar strongly disagreed, so they had differences of opinions. I think I could agree if he relied on one assessor, and there's question as to the strength of knowledge. I mean, some assessors are fabulous. They're doing single family and land. And I was in Iowa one day on a major manufacturing plant, and the assessor said, I never look at anything like this. He had to bring in somebody else. So there's certain things that go after certain others they may not have experienced.
Could you summarize your study of Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 312?
Yes, basically, we did research and found that in the state of Illinois, there are 18 counties where there are wind farms. We got the name of all 18 assessors, and went about with basically standardized general interviews to understand their opinions. And it was really quite enlightening. We were able to physically talk to 17 of the 18, and the 18th was a deputy assessor, so we got an opinion there. And actually, after the report was done, the assessor from Vermilion County returned our call and actually wrote a letter. So as I was standing here today, we actually physically talked to 18. Of these 18, we were looking at, did they have personal experience? Did they live in the footprint of a wind farm? What had been their professional experience with these? What was the input they were getting? What was happening with complaints? What was happening with value diminutions?
And just to interrupt for a moment, one of those 18 was the Livingston County Assessor, is that correct?
That's correct.
If you could continue.
So in my report, I provide the name, the county, the phone number of who we contacted. I have again another sub-file with specifics, more detail on the information. And a couple had lived within the wind farm areas, some had recreational activities. Of these 18, and I think there's 1,500 turbines between this group, and probably well over 1 million properties. There's been one appeal. There's been a lot of complaining verbally, and people made comments, but only one appeal, and that is in Vermilion, and that has not been ruled on. So there's not been one value reduction provided for all these counties. As the wind farms were announced, as they came in to the counties, the assessors were obviously called by county board members, by mayors, by trustees, and as shown in my report, many of them did research, and they couldn't find any studies or anything in their county that reflected diminution in value. And again, and so far through the date of this report, there's been no complaints. And some did their own research, which was provided in here. Page 4, in the bottom, there's a color picture, which is interesting in regard to a wind farm, not a wind farm, just one turbine by Hartland Community College within 1,900 feet of established high-quality single family. No complaints there. But probably the most compelling is page 6, which is in McLean County, where after the wind farm was developed, a new 4,821 square foot house was built. That is 1,113 feet from one turbine, and I believe under 1,800 feet from a second turbine. And the building permit on this house, the house itself was $878,000. On the picture on page 6, the top is the house, the bottom shows the house on the right, and the 2 turbines on the left. Then after that page, it just shows the counties, and it shows the numbers in the order that we did the interview. And then page 8 just shows the wind projects and the wind resources. And then after that, qualifications of another MAI in my office that worked on this.
Mr. Bruce, based on all the work that you've done, reviewed, do you have an opinion as to whether the Pleasant Ridge project, if it is permitted and built, will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the Union City where the use is already permitted, or substantially reduce the value of neighboring property?
Objection, Foundation. We have heard no evidence, no testimony, no research he's done, no appraisal report he's done with this conclusion. All we're now is getting a conclusion based upon I don't know what.
You can us your opinion, your professional opinion to that question. Yes.
In my professional opinion, the proposed project, based on all the studies and findings, will not have a negative impact on value.
On the same basis, do you have an opinion as to whether the Pleasant Ridge project, if it is permitted and built, will not impede orderly growth, development, and improvement of surrounding properties for those uses permitted in the zoning district?
Objection again, not only does he have no basis for this, it's beyond his expertise. He's not a land planner, he is an appraiser.
To that objection, we will agree with Mr. Lucan's on that. Your capacity is not as land planner, but rather as appraiser. So to speak to that would be, you don't have the experience with regard to that. So
That's all I have.
all right. CBA, do you have any questions of Mr. MaRous at this time? All right.
Mr. MaRous, I don't have your report, the first one that you spoke about, that was about 50 pages long, so I don't have that in front of me. You were discussing, or I guess critiquing the matched pairs that Mr. McKeon presented in his report. Were you able to, or did you put them in this Exhibit 311, more comparable matched pairs that would give us different results?
No, I did not.
Okay. So you're just basically pointing out that, look, all the properties included in that were matched, saying they were similar, and use the values that the property sold at were actually not comparable.
What I'm saying, based on the inconsistencies and some, what I would say, incomplete analysis, the information didn't reflect the diminution in value. The data wasn't good enough to come to that conclusion.
So the matched pairs were actually comparable pairs? I thought I understood you to say that they were not.
Well, they had some degrees of comparability. He was generally taking, a house in the target area, a house in the control area, and providing some similarities. But then when you went down and did further analysis, and again, looked at quality construction, the size, the value of the outbuildings, then they really didn't prove his conclusion of the significant diminution of value that he gave.
And when you're preparing an appraisal, what's the time frame that a property has to sell within in order to be considered a comparable sale? Isn't there a time limit?
It's called basically a marketing time, and the answer is yes. It depends on market conditions. For single family, it's generally preferably 30 days to 120 days. If you've got something that's more unique, that's larger, it's got some different characteristics, or let's say the market may be topped out 200,000, this is a $400,000 property, maybe the marketing time is extended, generally never more than a year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I just got two questions. As I look at Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 333, that webinar and handed out, was that, I would imagine that they went through the Hedonic model again and used that as their entire basis for this webinar?
They went through the Hedonic, they also went through other studies. They also looked at impacts of amenities and disamenities, landfills, electric transmission lines, highways, prisons, major roads, open space, and part of the consideration. And they looked, at other published data to come to their conclusion that there basically was not anything that was out there that supported, in a quality project, that there was a diminution in value.
Okay. It also states in here there's been some recent court cases that have they upheld this, the no diminution of value? Has there been court cases decided both ways, or you had mentioned that you did in fact watch this webinar, and I just thought you might have some additional information with regard to that.
I don't recall anything definitive on court cases that impacted either way, positive or negative.
Okay, all right. You made mention.
I do have a copy of basically the webinar.
All right. When we were talking about power transmission lines, you said you felt that after 200 or 300 feet there was no loss of value. Would that be 200 or 300 feet from the property line, or from actual residence?
Property line.
From property, okay. All right.
Because with the property line, you may not have something built within the allowable side yard, as that is what you can't build out of a future date. So if you've got 25-foot side yard, it's not built along that area, that doesn't mean the property or the future property owner can't build along it. Once you put an electric transmission line, it's probably within the forever.
That makes sense. 312, your second report, you actually noted that our Livingston County supervisor had lived within the wind farm footprint. Did he have any indication why he had in fact left that location?
Just normal family and personal reasons.
Okay.
Different need for housing. Not because of the wind farm, as I understand.
Okay, all right. That new home down near Bloomington, you said $878,000 they invested on it. Did you have any indication or find any information as far as maybe how long the property owner had owned that parcel previous to actually putting the home up on that location, or was the home put there because perhaps they owned the property for 20 years previous to it?
I don't know. I don't know how long they owned it. What I do know is they built after the wind farm was built, but I don't know.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for now. You guys have any questions now at this point?
I got that. That one you were just talking about, did they just own the property that the house is on, or did they own the property the windmill is on also?
No,
They
just
own
the house,
inside.
just the property around the house, but they're not part of the,
Okay.
interesting question.
Anybody else with questions at this point? Good. All right. Units of local government, school districts. Anybody with questions? Mr. Lukens?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mike, on a number of occasions throughout this hearing, Mr. Blazer keeps referring to the fact that you and I have done a number of projects for and you've testified on behalf of a number of my clients over the years. I don't think either you or I would dispute that, correct?
That's correct.
Let me ask this. This is the second time in the past approximately 18 months that you have testified on behalf of Mr. Blazer's clients in cases that I've been involved in, correct? This one in the group transfer hearing in Romney Park?
Correct.
And I was the hearing officer in the Romney Park case, correct?
Correct.
Objection beyond the scope of rebuttal. I didn't bring up anything about Mr. MaRous's prior relationship with Mr. Lucas.
It's just something you mention every time you mention his name.
I didn't mention that. First of all, it's not true. And second of all, clearly it wasn't part of the rebuttal presentation.
I'll withdraw that question on the hearing officer. I don't need it, it doesn't matter. Neither of these cases that you were asked by Mr. Blazer to actually do your own target control analysis, correct?
Objection. There were no questions in my rebuttal regarding any prior proceedings that Mr. MaRous is involved in Romney Park or anywhere else.
This goes directly to what he did or didn't do in this study. And the point is that he did not do a target control analysis. Can I finish my statement, please, Mr. Blazer? He did not do that. He did not do a full appraisal. And this is what Mr. Blazer asked him to do previously as well.
As to whatever he may or may not have done previously, that was not a subject of rebuttal, and according to the rules of rebuttal that this board has implemented, it's both the question and Mr. Lucahan's statements are proper and has to be straight.
All right, Mr. Lugan. We'll ask that you ask questions for things that he did for this case and not what he may have done previous or not done.
Okay, in this case, you spent about 50 pages critiquing Mr. McCann's report, correct?
Yes.
Even though you have and are clearly capable of doing your own independent analysis of effective wind turbines on property values, correct?
Correct.
You were never, however, asked to do that in this manner, either at the beginning of this project or the 4+ months after you originally testified, correct?
Correct.
Even after the point was brought up in cross-examination the first time, you were still not asked by Mr. Blazer to provide your own independent analysis, correct?
Correct.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever been hired? You've never been hired by my firm, have you, where you were only asked to critique another appraiser's opinion and not provide your own independent analysis or value of the effect of the project, correct?
Objection to be understood.
All right, that is irrelevant to this case.
Okay, let's go to Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 311. On page 5 of Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 311, you cite 4 instances where, in your opinion, Mr. McCann fails to cite the most recent edition of use patent, correct?
Yes.
I do not see anywhere in your report that you show that the older edition has any significantly different language than the more recent editions of use patent as it relates to this issue. Is that a fair reading of your report?
It does not say that.
Okay, so there's no actual substantive issue here. You just felt it necessary to point it out, correct?
That's correct.
You also say it cites to the wrong edition of the Dictionary of Real Estate Appraisal. Again, I see no point in your report that you advise us of any different language in the edition cited versus the current edition. Is that correct?
Correct.
There are things you do and opinions of your own when doing an appraisal that are not set forth in your reports, correct? You can't put everything you know about a piece of property or about an analysis in one report, correct?
Generally not.
Okay. If I go to the bottom of page 11 of Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 311, you talk about the marketing times set forth by Mr. McCann for both his target and control sales. You see that?
Yes.
And your conclusions of the end of this is that his opinion has, quote, not been developed as a definitive statement regarding the impact of proximity to wind turbines on marketing times, correct?
Correct.
You also point out things he should have looked at, such as, quote, prior listings to the property, end quote, correct?
Yes. As possibility if there were concern if he was further developing it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. I apologize.
As some additional steps he could have taken if he was attempting to provide more specific clarification where he had a strong conclusion as he did.
Okay, so what we don't know is whether he actually looked at them. You just say it's, quote, not clear, end quote, if these marketing times include these types of things, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. You also say that his marketing sales, quote, averages are developed without regard to sale date or market conditions. You see that?
Yes.
You then go on to say there's no analysis of market conditions contained in the report, correct?
Yes.
As an appraiser, you always take market conditions into consideration when you provide an opinion, correct?
I do.
However, we do not know as we sit here whether he took market conditions into consideration in his opinion and just didn't put it in his report, correct?
I would also have to go to his testimony, and I didn't hear or see any evidence that he did. So the answer is based on an extensive report and extensive testimony. It wasn't indicated that he did.
Okay, and it wasn't indicated in the cross-examination of him by Mr. Blazer that he didn't either, correct?
I don't recall.
Okay. Even after your criticism of Mr. McCann's report, I do not see anywhere in here where you have analyzed and provided your own opinion as to marketing times, can I?
That's correct.
So you cannot testify with any reasonable degree of certainty as to whether Mr. McCann's opinion in relation to marketing times is correct or incorrect, because you weren't asked to do that analysis. Is that correct?
Based on the information provided, I couldn't rely on his marketing times, but I did not do my own analysis and report of marketing time. But as far as the extensive time and effort and research, probably with a little more effort that could be done.
Okay, but it's not something you did, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's go to page 12 of Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 311. And to save some time, we'll just take one of your criticisms on this page, which is bathrooms, correct?
Yes.
You say a couple of things. One is that there's no support for the $3,000 adjustment for full baths versus $1,500 for half baths, correct?
Correct.
You also say that this kind of blanket adjustment does not account for difference between bathrooms with specialty fixtures, correct?
Correct.
I think we'd all probably agree with that. Isn't it true that you often use comps when doing appraisal where you've not been inside the bathroom of that comparable sale, correct?
Many times.
And were you here for Professor Thayer's testimony after that?
Professor who?
Thayer, San Diego State, the dynamic approach.
I was here for part of the testimony.
Okay. Your report, however, it's obvious you've read at least a portion of the LBNL study Professor Thayer has relied upon for his opinion, correct?
Yes.
And isn't it true that Professor Thayer stated that depending on the region, his study makes adjustment for certain amenities across the board based upon the area of the country? Do you recall that?
Yes.
In fact, one of the things he does is he says all pools in California are worth $45,000. Do you recall that?
I don't recall the number,
Okay, well.
but I recall that there is value in that market primarily because of the economics of the climate.
But he did not, to your knowledge, did you ever hear him distinguish between any particular type of pool, whether it be a $100,000 installation or a $20,000 installation?
I don't recall the differentiation.
Okay, thanks. On page 13, you discuss a letter from Joan Bullard. Did you have a conversation with her yourself?
No, Anita Rick from my office did. Anita, R-I-F-K-I-N-D, and then Ms. Bullard had sent us a letter in regard to her opinions,
Okay, well.
which I have.
Yes, I've seen it too. Bullard said the original purchaser overpaid, correct?
Yes.
However, I do not see anything in your report or her letter that says it was not an arm's length transaction by a willing buyer and a willing seller, correct?
That's correct.
I also see there's this kind of discussion about a shed. Do you know if it was a new shed or an old shed?
I don't have details on the shed.
Okay, it's not in your report, so I'm just asking the question. We know that the property was at least partially fixed up between the second and third transaction, correct?
Yes.
We also know that between the first and third transaction, the purchase price, according to the assessor's office, dropped from $143,000 in 2009 to $110,000 in 2012, correct?
That's correct.
That's at 20, I'm sorry.
Back to the shed issue, she conveyed to us it was of nominal value, but I don't have the sizes, the specs. It was just a mine-run shed, whatever that might be.
Okay, so we don't really know what it was because by this time it's about third hand or fourth hand.
There's no question that it is trickling down the line, but from the person that was involved in the deal indicated the shed had nominal value.
Okay, even saying that, so we have a 23% drop from 2009 to 2012 in sales price, correct?
Depending what we do with the $17,000 personal credit, yes.
Okay, even if we include the $17,000 personal credit and say it was improperly calculated, we still have a drop of $16,000 in those 3 years, correct?
That's correct.
And that's an 11% drop, actually it's 2.5 years, correct? August of 2009 to February of 2012?
Approximately, yes.
Okay, so we have an 11% drop in those 3 years, correct?
Without me getting out of the calculator, which
Hey,
I'll
I can promise you I'm not lying about the percentage. I might be off a point because I can't do it right, but
That's fine.
And both of those were, to your knowledge, as we said, the first one was an arm's length transaction, and the last one was also an arm's length transaction, to your knowledge, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and this property was 0.58 miles from the wind turbine, correct?
As I recall, yes.
Okay, so that would be about 3,062 feet, correct?
I'll take your word for it.
Thanks.
0.58, I mean, it's
Give or take.
fine.
Are you aware that the setbacks here from the wind turbine is actually much less than 3,000 feet?
Yes. I am.
And have you ever appraised residential property in Livingston County before?
Yes, I've done, I think I might have done, I've done land, probably not single family.
Okay. In pages 13 through 24 of your report primarily deal with errors, you might have said misleading statements, whatever you believe you have found in Mr. McCann's paradigm sale analysis, correct?
Correct.
The purpose of pointing out these errors would be that it makes one question Mr. McCann's conclusions. Is that your point?
Well, I think the point is the data is not good enough, and it's not good enough.
Mike, you know what? I apologize. Someone coughed and I didn't hear you, so I'm sorry.
It really isn't so much to be critical of Mr. McCann, but it's really showing, even with the effort that he put into it, the data is not good enough or perfect enough to make the adjustments to come to a conclusion. So then in the conclusion, yes, I think what he's provided when we take apart the transactions and analyze them, they don't support the significant diminishing in value of opinion that he has.
Okay. You said, I think, that your pages 13 to, I don't remember how far, we'll talk about it as we go on, found inconsistent info or lack of data on each sale. So let's, however, focus on, I'm going to focus on Livingston County. The board has at one time said that's the important county, and I think you're absolutely correct. And let's start with going through some of these sales. Let's start with target T1, as you label it, which is the sale of 18,687 North 100 East Road in Flanagan.
Yes.
Okay. You claim that because of the condition of the property, flooding, basement, unappealing deck rating, quote, it is impossible to find a similar property with which to compare this house, end quote, correct?
That's correct.
You would agree with me that it's always possible to make adjustments to sales for that kind of thing, correct?
Adjustments can be attempted, but when you have mold, which is really an environmental issue, as I think you and I both know, it makes it extremely difficult to quantify. So I think in certain situations, it's very difficult for the appraiser to actually quantify. But they can attempt to make adjustments.
Okay, and where in your report does it mention the word mold? Because I missed it if it does.
Page 13 under T1, the third paragraph, the second sentence, on the day of the contractor's inspection, the basement had flooded, there was a mattress floating in the water, and there was evidence of mold from prior flooding on the walls.
Okay, so this is the second sale, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you have no information that there was mold at the time of the first sale, do you?
That's correct.
You have no information that there was mold at the time of the third sale, correct?
That's correct.
And that's the one we talked about that has a, depending on how you look at it, either a $33,000 drop or a $16,000 drop in those 2.5 years, correct?
Between 1 and 3, it actually increased between 2 and 3.
Okay, but between 1 and 3, where there was no evidence of mold, we have a decrease of those two amounts I just mentioned, correct?
No, that's not correct, because during 1 and 3, mold came up.
Okay.
And it was known, it would have to be disclosed, whether it was correct or not, I don't know.
Okay, at the time of sale one, we just discussed, we don't know if there was mold at the time of sale.
That's correct.
We also don't know if the mold was fixed by the time of sale three, correct?
All we know is there had been mold, we don't know if it was remediated.
And we know that a contractor owned it between 2 and 3.
Correct.
Decorating taste is subjective, correct?
You're not going to let my wife read this, are you? Yes, it is subjective.
Even if the decor is bad and the house is bad, an adjustment can be made for that as well, correct?
Within reason, yes.
The study does not, or excuse me, you've reviewed the LBNL study, we talked about it. Regarding T1, you also criticized McCann's use of the property at 13665 East 3000 North Road in Blackstone. Because quote, this property has commercial use on the site, and the ability of the property to allow such a use is not considered, end quote, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, this is a good opportunity for us to take a 10-minute break. Why don't we take 10 minutes? I've got 8:10, so let's get going again at 8:20. All right?
This is a composite bill.
Tom, what this is it's a bunch of exhibits that we're going to use.
Just so I can throw this out there for everybody, our next meeting will be Tuesday the 12th at 6:30 at this location. Tuesday the 12th at 6:30. That's probably going to be the only meeting next week. There's some other conflicts and such. So Tuesday the 12th at 6:30. With that, Mr. Lucan's.
Okay, let's go back to where we were. I'll just kind of restate the prior questions so we know what we're talking about. You criticized Mr. McCann's opinion on the 3000 North Road to Blackstone property because you said the property has commercial use on the site, correct?
I didn't criticize it, just commented.
Okay. And you say such use is not considered?
Correct.
Okay. Showing you as remarked is UCLC Exhibit 160. This is the assessor's report for this property, correct?
Correct.
And if you look on the first page, about the third line down on the left, it says rural residential, correct?
Yes.
Does it say anywhere on here about any commercial use for this property?
Not on the assessors, but actually on the third page, it reflects 2 outbuildings containing over 5,000 square feet.
Okay, but it doesn't say there's any possible commercial use for the property, correct?
On the assessors page, no.
How about on UCLC Exhibit 161? This is the MLS sheet for that same property, correct?
I don't see any mention on the MLS sheet.
Okay, thank you. You also mentioned, let's go to the property C2 under T1, which is the 9210 East 1700 North Road property in Graymont.
Yes.
It's the second control sale, correct?
Correct.
You also suggested McCann omitted that C2 has a guest house, correct?
Correct.
Showing you what is marked as UCLC Exhibit 162. That's the assessor's data regarding the property, correct?
Correct.
The assessor's data does not show a guest house being on the property, does it?
I don't see it on there.
Okay, now let's go to UCLC Exhibit 163, that's the MLS data for that same property, correct?
Correct.
Again, the MLS data does not show a guest house, does it?
I have to review.
Take your time.
I don't see it on there.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to T2, which is bottom page 14, we start talking about target 2 sale. You also talk about the deficiency of using the sale or its adjustments at 20558 East 100 North Road, which is control sale 1, correct? And it says it's not adjusted for having more bedrooms than the target sale, correct?
Correct.
How many bedrooms does the target sale have?
I would take it back.
It has 4, correct?
I'll take your word for it.
Okay. Let's go to UCLC Exhibit 164. Again, that's the MLS data for that same property. How many bedrooms does that show?
It lists 4 bedrooms, but it also has a den that is my understanding. I thought could have been used for a bedroom.
Your understanding is you thought it could be a 5th bedroom. Is that what you said?
Yes.
McCann stated he adjusted for the square footage of C1, this property, compared to the target one, correct?
You're still talking about the same property?
Yeah.
I believe you did, yes.
Okay. And the square footage of control 1, the property we're talking about, remains the same whether it has 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, let's go to the next property you talk about under T2, which is the second control sale at 4667 East 1600 North Road, Fleming.
Yes.
And again, that's used to compare to T2. You state that, quote, there appear to be more outbuildings on this property than included on page 32 of McCann's report, including grain silos, end quote, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to, did you know that this parcel was once part of the larger parcel with the outbuildings and silos, but it was sold separately?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you know the assessor's record shows that the parcel with the house is a separate lot with its own pin?
Do I know, or is it a fact?
Well, let's go to, you can look at UCLC Exhibit 162, or 166, Mike, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, that's the assessor's data for the sale, and that shows the PIN number is 13-13-26-400, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now let's go to UCLC Exhibit 167. That's the MLS data for the same sale, correct? Same property, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's the same PIN number we just talked about, the 13-13-26-400, correct?
Correct.
And go to Exhibit 168, if you will. UCLC Exhibit 168, I'm sorry. And that's the assessor's aerial photograph showing the boundaries of the property of that pin. Did you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And you can tell that the parcel with the house is a different parcel from the outbuildings and silos, correct?
Correct.
Let's go to C5, which is the 12 12610 North 1900 East Road in Fairbury. And that, comparing it still to the T2. Okay? It's on page 15, it's the second full paragraph.
Yes.
You state that, quote, it appears that this property may have been assembled with an adjoining property because the Livingston County Assessor indicates the property has 10.02 acres, not 5.01 acres, correct?
Yes.
Okay, look at UCLC Exhibit 169. That's the assessor's website for the sale, correct?
Yes.
And that's got an acreage of 5.01 acres, correct?
Correct.
Not 10.02, correct?
Not on this exhibit that you have.
Okay, well, let's go to the MLS listing, which is the next exhibit. UCLC Exhibit 169. Or excuse me, 170, the next one, sorry. Again, this shows the property is 5.01 acres, correct?
It does.
So both documents show the same 5.01 acres that Mr. McCann used, correct?
They do.
Okay, let's go to C6. Again, the sixth sale on the same page regarding T2, and it's located at 19578 East 260 North Road, Fairbury.
Yes.
Okay. You state, quote, there is no adjustment to the location of this property indicated as being close to town and in proximity to the Indian Creek wood area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Look at UCLC Exhibit 171. That's an aerial photograph showing C6 proximity to the town of Fairbury. Is that the closeness you're talking about?
Yes.
So, just in my own math, the populated part of Fairbury, you take that, the distance between the populated part of Fairbury and the property is about 4 or 5 times the size of Fairbury, correct?
I wouldn't say that much, but it's
At least 3.
could be.
Okay. And showing you Exhibit 172. Again, this is an aerial photograph of the same property that you said was in proximity to the Indian Creek wood area, correct?
Correct.
It's not next to the Indian Creek wood area, is it?
I didn't say that, I said proximity.
Okay. Proximity. And Exhibit 172 shows that proximity, correct?
Yes, it does.
The creek is across, the creek and the wood area across the street, correct?
That's correct.
And there's a property in between them as well? Looks like
Directly, but there are other intervening areas to provide access.
okay, but there's no direct access to either the woods or the river from there, correct?
Not adjoining the property, which I did not say, that's correct.
Okay. You also state on page 15 that in the same sale that there is no adjustment for a newly remodeled kitchen. Do you see that?
Correct.
Do you have McCann's report up there? UCLC Exhibit 70?
I have it with me.
Okay. And when you get to it, Mike, if you go to page 36.
Yes.
If you look at that same sale on page 36, you will note, will you not, that that Mr. McCann notes that the property has been remodeled, correct?
Says remodel, average to good.
Okay. Let's go to target 6. Keep moving, otherwise we'll be here all night. This target regarding this property, you say that the MLS sheet, it's on page 17, first full paragraph. The MLS sheet says the building has a crawl space. The assessor says it is constructed on a slab, correct?
Yes,
And so you had a concern about which was correct.
I just brought it out as a point.
Okay. You don't have any idea whether Mr. McCann actually knew that it was a slab or a crawl space, correct?
I do not.
Okay. Look at Exhibit 170, UCLC Exhibit 176, if you would. It's a few back. Let's skip a few.
Yes,
In fact, the assessor's data regarding the property in UCLC Exhibit 176 says it has a crawl space, correct? Bottom left side. Just keep it moving.
crawl.
Okay. And if you look at UCLC Exhibit 177, which is the MLS sheet, that also shows the property as having a crawl space, correct?
It does.
Okay. And if you go to UCLC Exhibits 178 and 179, particularly, let's just go to 179, it's a little clearer there. On the right-hand side of that house, or the side of the house, you can see that vents are in the foundation, correct?
Yes,
So we know there was a crawl space there, correct?
you would appear to do so.
Okay. And that's what McCann said, he listed it as having a crawl space, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Let's go to C4 under Target 6. Again, this is the sale at 305, the fourth control sale, page 17. 30596 North 700 East Road, Danville. You state that the property is not adjusted for being near a golf course, correct?
Correct.
We would agree it's not adjacent to the golf course, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, there are other parcels in the wooded area between this property and the golf course, correct?
I know it was proximate, I don't recall the being proximate.
Okay, well, why don't you look at UCLC Exhibit 180 then?
180 what?
180, straight up.
Okay.
Okay, the parcel we're talking about is the middle parcel between, we have three parcels, look like residential parcels in a row, correct?
Correct.
Right in the middle of the page. And the parcel we're talking about is 02-1700-100-019. Looking at that, you can tell that there are other parcels in a wooded area between this property and the golf course, correct?
Several small lots. but it's-
Okay, so we can't even be certain from this aerial whether this property has a view of the golf course, can we?
Depending the elevation and the height and the view, it's not possible to ascertain. It would appear that probably out the back, angling out, you'd be able to see it.
Looking through the wooded area.
Yes.
Okay. You often use assessor square footage numbers when doing appraisal, correct?
Yes.
And these are normally based upon approved building plan, is that fair statement?
Many times physical inspection and measurement.
Okay. And square footage and MLS listing sheets are often done by a broker who measured the rooms, correct?
Correct.
Let's go to T7. You state on the top of page 18, there is no adjustment to the site for the presence of a 2.5 acre unusable area, correct?
Yes,
The 2.5 acres unusable area is mentioned as a pond, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. In a commercial setting, we would all agree that it's unusable land, right? It's not really much of a benefit in a commercial setting. And I'm not saying this is a commercial setting. I'm just throwing it out. I'm not trying to trick you, man.
It provides stormwater, it provides open space, but it's generally much more desirable than residential.
Okay. And as you said, ponds are often considered to be desirable to a single-family residence, correct?
They are.
Okay. Let's go to T8. This is the property sold in November 2011 which is the property, I'm sorry, at 24458 North 2500 East Road in Odell. And this property sold in November 2011 for $186,000 according to your report, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If you could go to UCLC Exhibit 181, that's the assessor's data for the same property, correct?
Yes.
In fact, in November 2011, the property actually sold not for $186,000, but for $159,000, correct? The $186,000 actually happened a couple years later.
Yes, so what was your,
My question is, November 2011, the house sale is not for $186,000, but for actually $159,000, correct?
$186 appears to be 2013, 11 was the 159.
So,
There's a subsequent sale.
okay, but the 2011 sale, we would agree, is not the $186,000, correct?
No,
Okay, so you just made a mistake, correct?
that's correct.
Okay. You also state that there is a significant discrepancy between the size of the house provided by the MLS of 2,078 square feet and by the assessor of 1,946 square feet, correct? It's the first full paragraph on page 19, Mike.
Yes,
Okay. McCann used the assessor's number of 1,946 square feet, correct?
I believe you did.
And we can figure that out just by doing the math, 159,000 divided by the square foot price, and we come up with the square feet, correct?
Yes.
Let's go to T9 on page 19, which is the property at 32900 North 2000 Road, Dwight. Sorry, I'm not real good with all these long numbers and properties. We're used to 14, 13 and things up where we live. You state that the report indicates that the house has been remodeled. However, there is no information in that regard on the listing sheet. That's what you state on page 19, correct?
Correct.
Showing you, if you could look at Exhibit 182, that's the MLS data sheet for the property, correct?
Yes.
Next to age on the sheet, it says 91 to 100 years, comma, recent rehab, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the MLS sheet does actually contain information that the property has been recently remodeled, correct?
Yes.
Let's go to T13. Let's talk about the second sale under there, which is at 11757 North 1900 East Road in Fairbury.
Yes.
You state that the adjustment does not really reflect the size of C2 because of the discrepancy in the target sale, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. However, McCann used the assessor's square footage for shown for T13, correct?
There were, yes, he did, but the assessor was 2296 and the MLS was 1896.
Okay. And we've talked about the assessor is either relying on building plans or actually doing the site on most occasions, correct?
On most occasions.
Okay. Okay, let's go to target 15 that you have problems with. That's at 29227 North 2300 East Road in Odell. Starts on the bottom of page 22. You state that the assessor's website has both a 5-acre site size and a 3.5-acre site size. I was unable to determine the correct site size, correct?
Yes.
However, Mr. McCann used the 5 acres in his analysis, correct?
I believe he did.
Okay, let's go to UCLC Exhibit 184. That's the assessor's data for the target property, correct? For T15?
this is the one, though, they showed two different sizes. This may not be property record cards, and I think there may be two sets on this one.
Okay, but so right now, if we're looking at UCLC Exhibit 184, which we agree is the assessor's property,
Correct.
we see the grand total of 5.00 acres according to the assessor, correct?
Yes.
And they have the number of 3.45 acres, but it's part of the 5.00, at least in their opinion, correct?
It's called ag land.
Okay, but it's part of the total 5 acres. It's not above and beyond according to this.
Correct.
Okay. And then let's go to Exhibit 185. Again, this is the MLS data for the same property. And that analysis shows, or that also shows the property to be 5 acres, correct?
Yes.
And again, Mike McCann used 5 acres in his analysis for this property, correct?
Correct.
Okay, let's go to C2 under T15. That's the property located at 10725 East 1700 North Road in Pontiac.
Yes.
Okay, you say the assessor indicates a site size of 2.69 acres. The report uses 5.64 acres. I was unable to reconcile this discrepancy. You recall saying that? Or you see saying that?
I said it in the report.
Okay. And showing you exhibits 186 and 187 together, those are assessors data sheets for 2 parcels, correct? Those are 2 different parcels, correct?
Yes, on different lots.
Okay. And one is, Exhibit 186 shows 2.69 acres on one lot, correct?
Yes.
And you see that Exhibit 186 shows that the lot is improved with a single-family home, correct?
Yes.
And then if we look at 187, it shows 2.95 acres, but it contains no information regarding improvements, correct?
Correct.
It also has no address, correct?
That's correct.
And you see that the sales of both lots, both in 2014 and 2009, were at the exact same time, correct? Or within a couple days, actually, each one.
They weren't exact, but they were close.
Okay, at least the 2009 sale was exact, correct? They were both sold on December 12th, 22nd, 2009.
Yes.
And then the other one was 2 days apart. That would suggest to me that the sales of both lots were at the same time, correct? Excuse me, let me strike that. That would suggest to me that these 2 adjacent lots sold together, correct?
Possible.
Yeah. And showing you Exhibit 188, UCLC Exhibit 188, that's the tax record for the 2.95 acre lot, correct?
Yes.
And that confirms that the 2.95 acre lot is classified as vacant residential, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then if we go to UCLC Exhibit 189, that's the MLS data for that exact same property, correct? Actually, for both those lots combined, correct?
Yes.
And 2.69, which is the first, which is UCLC Exhibit 186, and 2.95, which is UCLC Exhibit 187, you add those up and you get 5.64 acres, correct?
Yes.
And 5.64 acres is the actual acreage Mr. McCann used, correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to T17. We're the last one of these targets here. Regarding Control 1, which is 18375 East 2500 North Road, Liddell. You state that the reason to report a justice sale for having fewer bathrooms than the target sale is not clear, correct?
So I say.
You state that the target property is 1.5 bathrooms, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Look at exhibit 190, if you would. UCLC exhibit 190. That's the assessor's data for control for this same property on 2500 North Road, Liddell, correct?
Yes.
Okay, the assessor's data shows that this sale has only one bathroom, correct?
That's what it reflects.
Okay, and if I go to UCLC exhibit 191, which is the MLS data for this property, that also reflects only one bathroom, correct?
That's what I say.
Okay. And in fact, this same property is also control 3 under 216 on page 23, correct? Actually, page 23 and 24, sorry. It's the same property on the prior page.
Correct.
Okay, here you say that the property only has one bathroom, correct?
Yes.
But then on the next page, you say the exact same property has 1.5
Yeah,
bathrooms.
it's the one bathroom is the correct one.
Okay, so having an adjustment made for having fewer bathrooms on control 1 rather than the target's 1.5 bathroom, that's an appropriate adjustment, correct?
I would retract that comment.
Okay, thank you. MLS data is typically used by appraisers, correct?
Yes.
As is data from the county or township assessor's office, correct?
Yes.
And as we sit here, it's hard for us to say globally whether one is more accurate or reliable than the other, correct?
It depends upon the quality of the broker. Many brokers will have blueprints and they're physically invited into the property and you only have better access than the assessor. And if we're talking about a new subdivision, the assessor will have accurate plans, but when we're talking 30 to 50-year-old properties, there are changes, additions, sometimes they're not picked up or sometimes they're errors as time goes on in the assessor's file. So it really depends which one is more accurate. The most accurate is a plat survey and a plat of plans that show everything, and both the assessor and the brokers don't always get that.
Okay, so we don't know definitively which one's always correct or not, correct? Isn't appraiser?
I would agree.
Okay. Let's go to page 26 of Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 311, which is your first report we talked about today again. One of the things you talk about is that you're discussing the property at 24487 North 2150 East Road Hotel, correct?
Yes.
And you state that you talk about an increase for $35,000 in value from August of 2008 to March of 2010, correct?
Yes.
And you state that there were significant upgrades to the property, such as repaired well, rewired the electrical, remodeled the kitchen, added a second bathroom with a shower, and remodeled other areas of the house, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I do not see in your report that you list the actual amounts expended on those repairs, so we can see how much the person put into the house, can we?
I did not have that exact number.
Okay. Depending on the amounts put into this remodel, the cost could have been more or less than $35,000, correct?
It's possible.
You've seen remodeled kitchens alone that cost over $30,000, correct?
Yes.
In fact, that was probably your wife's, but I'll leave that alone. Just for the record, this home at 24487 North 2150 East Road, Odell, is approximately 1.5 miles away from the nearest wind turbine, correct?
Yes.
And it's one wind turbine, correct?
Yes.
Let's go to page 36 of your report. You say that McCann's criticism that it fails to consider individual property characteristics is wrong. Well, I'm sorry, let's set this up a little better. This is talking about the LBNL study, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you say that McCann's criticism, and I'm going to, so you don't have to search for it, is wrong, and I think, yeah, it's the fourth paragraph. You say it's wrong because it fails to consider, because he said that it fails to consider individual property characteristics as wrong, his opinion is, because every property in the report was visited by a researcher. Okay, well, I may disagree with that conclusion. The fact is that just like your analysis of McCann's report, there's no statement in the record or the LBNL report that the researchers ever went inside any of the homes, correct?
That's correct.
And you say that McCann is doing a review report of the LBNL study. Again, while I may disagree with that characterization. And you also say that under USPAT, McCann must meet specific USPAT criteria and that those criteria are not addressed in this report, correct?
Correct.
McCann never states in his report that he is doing a review appraisal under USPAT, does he?
No, he does not.
In fact, the LBNL report does not even comply or attempt to comply with USPAT, according to Professor Thayer, correct? That's what he said.
That is correct.
You discuss Mr. McCann's reliance on the Lansing study on page 37 and say there's no discussion of the impact the recession had on residential values in Canada. That there was no discussion, correct?
Yes.
Again, we don't know if it was considered or not, we just know that he didn't mention it, correct?
That's correct.
And you go on to state that the resales require the purchaser to quote, or to waive, excuse me, quote, all rights to sue the developer for any issues related to the operation of the wind turbines in the area. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the wind turbine company recognized the possibility of people suing them for damages and were trying to protect themselves from that, correct?
It's really a legal question. Obviously, major companies attempt to mitigate litigation and protect themselves, so that's what they did.
Okay. And one thing I do not see you have an opinion on in your 46-page report is that McCann's analysis of the LBNL study, which relies on the International Association of the IIA Association we talked about earlier. You don't say that the LNPL study as it relates to the reliability or R2 factors is improper, do you?
I do not.
In fact, your opinion is heavily based on the fact that, quote, without the raw data on which the information is based, it is not possible to examine the conclusions in significant detail, correct?
That's correct.
To your knowledge, the raw data put into Professor Thayer's black box from the LBNL study has never been provided in this hearing or ever published in any journal, has it?
Not aware of.
Okay? Let's go to the Foulmouth, Virginia study. One of your complaints about Mr. McCann relying on the study is that, quote, without additional explanation of adjustments, this mere matched pair analysis does not support a determination that proximity to a wind turbine negatively affects residential property values. Is that correct?
What page are you on?
The Foulmouth study, and I'm sorry, I didn't get the page number in front of me.
43?
Starts on 43.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. That was one of your criticisms, correct?
Yes.
However, as you sit here today, we do not know what other information Mr. McCann may or may not have had regarding the study, correct?
Again, that was for him to provide and explain to the reader, so the reader would adequately know.
And it was also for Mr. Blazer, could have asked him during cross-examination, correct?
Objection.
All right, we'll strike that question. Proper question at this time.
You sat here for Mr. Blazer's crossing Mr. McCann, correct?
No, I didn't. I read the transcript. I was here for night one.
Okay, so you read the transcript.
And I saw part of the cross, but I didn't see all of
Okay, and you said you read the transcript. In that transcript, did you ever see Mr. Blazer ask him what additional information he may have had on the study?
Check to the relevance of beyond the scope.
I don't know how it's beyond the scope.
All right, we'll allow his objection. It's not relevant as far as what questions he asked him.
Let's talk about, do you have McCann's PowerPoint there in front of you? Or can you have it handy? UCLC Exhibit 71? I think you talked about it earlier.
I don't know what exhibit I have in my own file called McCann overhead, so.
Okay, it's the one that talks about Falmouth, Massachusetts value diminution. It's about 2/3 of the way, maybe through page 30. It's got a label on it.
Yes.
Okay. And in there, one of your criticisms is that he is using an average there, correct?
Yes.
His analysis, however, was not based on the average, was it? He just used it and had it in there.
Yes, presented the PowerPoint, that was, to me, the indication of what he was doing.
Okay, but
In the presentation, I mean, that's what he did, he had the average.
okay, but if you go down into the paragraphs, it says comparison reveals that the 833 Falmouth Highway property, located in proximity to the Wind 1, 2, and Webb turbines, is sold for a discounted or below market price, and then he goes on to indicate that the difference is 32%, correct?
Yes,
You used averages in your first report, correct, in this case?
I did.
UCLC Exhibit 41,
I did.
and you've criticized Mr. Steininger for using averages, correct, as well as Mr. McCann right now?
I did.
Okay. Let's go to Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 312, which is your second report, correct?
The assessor's study?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see Allison Hastings, ALLYSONHASTINGS, name on this report as well as yours, correct?
That's correct.
I'm assuming Allison made these phone calls, correct?
Correct.
To your knowledge, assessors do not keep records on how long it takes a property to sell, correct?
Some do, they all don't.
Okay, did you ask these 18 assessors whether they had those records? Or did Allison ask, I should say?
I have a backup file. So. wasn't a marketing type question asked.
Okay, it was not.
No.
I apologize, I'm dying.
Sorry.
Dying. Have you ever done a study before where all you did was call a number of assessor's office and ask for them information and then essentially testify as to what they told you?
I don't recall doing that, no.
Okay, I assume you don't recall ever having that type of opinion being placed into a court of law as an opinion, correct?
Well, that's not true. In doing other impact studies, we will call market participants, brokers, buyers, sellers, lenders, and doing a very similar type of opinion and providing that as evidence. This is a very tight, similar study that we did. It's very consistent with historical work.
Okay, but you've never, to your knowledge, entered a report into evidence that consisted or testified in court of something that consisted of nothing more than you just calling the assessor's office and asking for their statements, correct?
Well, it was a lot more than nothing more, but as far as a assessor survey, that's correct.
Okay. And it does not take the expertise of an appraisal expert to call and ask these questions and report these answers, correct?
In my opinion, I disagree. Ms. Hastings, who you know, has her MAI designation, has been appraising for 25 years and is very experienced, and I wanted somebody with that type of expertise to basically drill down on the issues that the counties had distances, value impacts, productivity, economic impacts, etc.
We'll get down to how far she drilled down in a minute, but let me ask this question. Assessors are employees of the county, correct?
Yes.
At least downstate, other than these particular assessors, I should say.
Well, some are not full-time, but they're employees of the county, is correct.
Okay, and all I was trying to do is make a differentiation between up north where we have township assessors instead of county assessors.
Fine.
Okay. And these employees, these assessors' office you call, their budgets are set by the county, correct?
Yes.
And county taxes are part set by the EAVs for homes, correct?
Sorry, say again?
Yeah, I'll slow it down too. Sorry. County tax revenues are part at least set by the EAVs for homes, correct?
Correct.
You would agree that Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 312 is not an appraisal, correct?
That's correct.
It's also not a review report under USPAC, correct?
That's correct.
And USPAC are the standards that apply to when you do actual appraisal or review reports, correct?
Correct.
Okay, in your report you talk about a report that the Bureau County Assessor gave to the board. And to your knowledge, that report, you have no knowledge of whether that report was completed in accordance with USPAC, correct?
I don't believe it was.
Okay. Do you know how?
As part of the discussion with Mr. Sweeney, the answer would be no.
Okay. And do you know how close property number 1, which is listed on page 3 of your report, was to the wind turbine?
The exact distance, no.
Okay, how about property number 2 or property number 3?
The exact distance, no.
Okay, so she didn't drill down that far. So do you have the addresses for those these three properties that you can provide us?
I do not.
Okay. And can you tell us how many wind turbines are in this wind farm industrial area?
There are 4 in the county, so we go outside the county.
But there are 4 in Bureau County.
There are 4.
Okay, versus 136 that will be put in here.
No, there are 4 different farms.
Okay, do you know how many
So-
farms there are? I apologize if you're going.
So you're asking,
Mike, just one second. I'm going to apologize because I cut you off. So now please proceed.
so the exact number of turbines, I don't know, but it's significant. It's over a couple hundred between the farms. Some are bigger than others.
Okay, we don't know whether any of these are, how close they are to which particular wind farm, correct?
No, I know the names of the wind farms, but it was really looking at the county globally, looking at the number of wind farms as they came in, they were in existence, what had transpired, value impacts that they had seen, and actually complaints filed because of the wind farms.
And do you know what the megawatts are those for those wind farms are?
The total, without the number, my understanding is many are very similar to the subject, proposed subject.
Many of the total
Many of the turbines are similar sized to the subject.
Okay, the total megawatt put out by each particular farm.
I do not.
Okay. And you say property number 1 was considered a quote statistical outlier and quote by the assessor, correct?
Yes.
And we would agree that 3 is not a lot of sale, that we only have 3 property sales analyzed, and that's a pretty small sample size, wouldn't you agree?
It's an interesting question because he had the whole county to draw some. These were the 3 that he took a harder look at.
Okay, and of those,
He looked at everything in the county that he thought were impacted. He thought these 3 were the best examples. So it
And
really
he-
isn't just 3.
and your notes say that he said that specifically to Ms. Hastings?
Yes.
Can you quote her notes to you on that? Word for word?
Several years ago, Mr. Sweeney was asked by the county board to prepare an analysis to determine if there had been an impact upon property values due to the development of the wind farms. The wind farms are in sparsely populated areas and there's little market activity. He prepared a paired sales analysis using successive sales of 3 residential properties in the area of the findings, or the area of the wind farms, his findings, and then he came to a conclusion that there was no indication that the wind farm had any negative impact on property values.
So he said the wind farms here are in sparsely populated areas, correct?
That's what he said.
Okay. And of the 3 sales, he considered one of them a statistical outlier. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Property number 2, you say that the property sold for, quote, a little more, end quote, than before the previous sale, before the development of the wind farm, correct?
Yes.
When did the wind farm construction begin, do you know?
The first one was 204, Crescent Ridge 205, Agri-Wind 208, and Providence Heights 208.
Okay, when was the first sale of property number 2?
I don't have the specifics, I just have the conclusions.
Okay, so we don't know when the first sale was. If it was 2005, 2008. We have no idea, correct?
That is correct.
We don't know if it was before or after the wind turbines were approved or constructed, correct?
My understanding is after they were constructed.
But we don't know if it was before or after they were approved, correct?
Well, if they were constructed, they were approved.
The sale being before or after the approval was done in Bureau County.
After, my understanding. And the before may have been before they were approved. The afters were always after they were either approved.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the first sale only. That was my question. I apologize if I wasn't very clear. The first sale of that property, we don't know if it was before or after the wind turbines, the wind turbine in proximity to that sale had been approved, correct?
My understanding was before.
And do you have notes there to tell you what that understanding is?
I do not.
Okay. And again, you didn't talk to this appraiser, this assessor, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Property 3 sold for more than the earlier sale, but less than the assessor's opinion of market value, correct?
Correct.
When was the first sale of property 3? Do we know that?
My understanding was before the wind farm was constructed.
Okay. But you don't know the dates?
I do not.
We don't know the dates of the sale of property, the second sale of property 3 either?
I do not.
The assessor did not say that there was no effect due to the wind turbine, did he? He only said that, quote, based upon the limited amount of market data available, there was no evidence of diminution, correct? That's the second full paragraph?
Yes, but I've got additional backup, but that is the conclusion.
That's the conclusion he provided. Okay. Likewise, the Logan County assessor said that there had been agreement that there is, quote, no proof one way or another, end quote, correct?
You're going to Logan now?
I'm just going down that same page, yeah.
Yes.
And that's not the kind of statement you would normally significantly rely upon when approving, when providing an appraisal of your use map, is it?
In totality, when you consider 18 counties, 18 assessors, over 1 million parcels, with similar conclusion, and over 1,500 turbines, collectively, it makes a statement. Individually, no.
Okay, and we don't know who the Logan County assessor says there has been agreement with, correct?
No.
Okay, let's go to the McLean County assessor, one of those 18 that come to this agreement, or have come to this opinion. And that's Mr. Kamen, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he talks about the fact that there have been no complaints or tax appeals filings in relation to the college's wind turbine, correct?
Yes.
Do you have, let's go to the photo on page 4, which you talked about, Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 312.
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that. It's, for the record, that shows a wind turbine in the middle of the page, correct?
Yes.
To the east of that is the Heartland Community College, correct?
Yes.
And then we have a single-family home directly south of the wind turbine.
Yes.
And then we have, looks like some kind of multi-family development south of that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we have one single turbine, correct?
That's correct.
So he's relying on the sales around one single turbine, correct?
And for that example,
Yeah.
they've got more than county.
Okay, but for this particular area, he's relying on one single turbine that is not part of the wind farm, it's part of Heartland Community College, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you know what the height of that tower?
The exact height, no.
Do you know the watts produced by that tower?
I do not.
You don't know the nighttime noise emissions of that single turbine at the townhomes either, do you?
His opinion, it was nominal.
He's not, you don't have any evidence that he actually modeled or measured out there, do you?
He's not an acoustical engineer, I know.
Agreed. And this is part of the college campus, Heartland Community College, correct?
As it was a minute ago, yes.
And Heartland is a junior college, correct?
My understanding, but junior colleges are going through some conversion, so I don't want to go too far. I'm not a university expert.
Okay, but like College of DuPage, it's a junior college, but it's bigger than Illinois State almost, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And we would expect that Heartland has night classes, correct?
Yes.
And we would say that this community college is more intense than a classical single-family residential or farm use, correct?
Yes.
So this townhome development is already next to a pretty significant use, significantly intensive use other than just the wind turbine, correct?
There's a lot of vacant land around it, but yes.
Okay. And how much do you charge to do a comparable sales report for a tax appeal for a single-family home?
Josh and Dan, let's go.
No, he talks about there's no. Can I respond? He says there has been no real estate tax objections, and I want to delve into why that is. He said there's been one, and I want to delve into exactly why that is, and I think that's a fair topic to discuss.
All right, go ahead and continue, Mr. Lugan.
How much do you charge to do a comparable sales report for a tax appeal for a single-family home?
We really don't do tax appeals for single-family homes. That's not a component of our business, but the market fees, depending on the size, the acreage, the complexity, would be anywhere generally from $250 to $450.
Okay, so 250 to 450.
Correct.
And then in an appeal like this, you've sat through appeals of property tax injections, correct? You've testified.
A couple hundred.
Yeah. And some for me. And how long does an appeal like that take? An hour, 2 hours? It's not a 10-second process, correct?
Depending on the issue, with single family, it's probably 15 minutes to 45 minutes typically.
Okay, and McCann said the reduction in value between properties in his report was over 20%, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to provide to you my Pleasant Ridge, the first page of Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 245. I'll just hand it out so people can follow along. Okay, this is the first page of Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 245, which was put in by Mr. Glazer, and it's the Livingston County Assessor's website, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and this is a 3-acre parcel, correct? Look for a legal description, like it says 3.08.
Okay.
And then, so the assessed value of the house in this house is approximately $130,000, correct? 42.
Yes.
277 times 3.
Yeah.
And their total tax bill in a year is about $3,448, correct?
Correct.
So if they were to get a 20% reduction in the tax bill for 1 year, that would save them about $690 in taxes, correct?
Depending if they're a triennial or quadrennial, it would go for 3 or 4 years. So it would be 1 year of the 600 plus, with 3 or 4, it would generally be 2,000, 2,500.
Or but if it was in the last year, it would be the 1 year. The last year of the quadrennial, correct?
Generally, when there's notices, people file their appeal during the first year of the notice period. But if it's only 1 year, yes. But generally, these appeals go for longer than 1 year.
And if it was a 10% reduction, it would only save them about $345 for that year, correct?
Yes.
It's a lot of time and expense to save $345. Would you agree?
If it's only 345, I would say yes, but it sets a future basis. And again, if it's for a 3 or 4 year period, it's basically 1,000 to 1,300.
Okay, so for 3 years, 345 times 3 is approximately $1,000. Pay an appraiser, you go through the process, you don't know what the end result is, correct?
That's correct.
Let's talk about new residential construction. You say that in Lee County there are 11 improved residential lots and the construction occurred after construction of the wind farm, correct?
Which one are you talking about?
Lee County. And Mike, if you could speak in the microphone, I'm here getting emails or texts that they can't hear you. It's the bottom of page 5, new residential construction.
McLean County.
I got Lee. The first paragraph.
Oh, the first paragraph.
You said there are 11 approved residential lots, and the construction occurred after construction of the wind farm, correct?
I believe it says after the announcement of the development.
Okay. So, and one thing your report does not tell us is how close they are to the wind farm, does it?
It does not.
And it goes on to say there are several reports of construction of large acreage farm homes, houses in the areas of the wind farm properties. How many is 7? That's the next paragraph. Do we know?
I believe that's collectively, and I don't have a specific number.
Okay, but that's collectively several over the 18 counties, correct?
Correct.
So we have several over 18. You discussed a particular parcel within 1,113 feet of a wind turbine. Do you know if that person was a participant or a non-participant in the wind farm?
My understanding is they were not.
And how did you come to that understanding?
Through the interview with the McLean County assessor.
Okay. So did Allison specifically ask whether the person was a participant in the wind farm?
Not in all cases, but in that one, because it kind of showed this very large, very expensive house, actually proximate to 2 turbines. If you look at the aerial on the bottom of page 6, I believe the second one was plus or minus 1,800 feet away.
Okay. And so, do you have a note where she specifically asked and was told he was not a participant that you can read to us?
I do not have a note.
Okay.
That was part of her verbal discussion with me as she was putting together her report, her backup for her report.
Again, this is information that would be beneficial to know, but it's not in the report, correct?
It's probably a good idea, yes.
Okay. What's the outbuilding? There's a big outbuilding on the property. You see that?
Yes.
Do you know what it is?
As I recall, I believe it's a garage or a barn type use.
Okay. Do you know what's stored in there?
I do not.
Would it surprise you if I told you there were commercial vehicles stored in and around that barn?
If you observe them, generally when somebody has a big barn or outbuilding, they put larger vehicles in them.
Like semi-trailers, tractors, those kinds of things?
It's possible.
Mike, I'm going to show you what it is. UCLC Exhibit 192. This is a photo, an aerial of that same property, correct? Blown up more, but just not quite as much.
Correct.
Or maybe, wish I could get it better, but it got unclear. Do you see the commercial vehicles, or what appears to be a commercial vehicle, to the northeast of the large building?
It could be, it looks like it potentially could be a truck.
And this property appears to be used for a lot more than just a home, correct?
There's a large home with a swimming pool, and then there's a significant separation, separate entrance, separate driveway for the larger outbuilding use.
But it's all on the same lot, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And one of the outbuildings is big enough to actually store not only farm equipment, it appears like semis, if I can look at the size of the store, correct?
If the doors are big enough, yes.
Okay. And we would not consider this property in and of itself to be purely residential use, would you?
Well, with ancillary support, which many properties like this have in rural settings, so it's not that atypical.
Do we know how much of that $800,000 was for this, quote, outbuilding?
The majority was for the house and the pool.
And how do you know that?
The assessor.
The assessor told you the actual cost of the house and the pool and broke out the house, the pool, and the outbuilding for Allison?
The assessor said that the building permit for $850,000, or the approximate amount, was the majority was for the house and the pool.
And you have a note on that where you told Allison that?
In my file now.
In the numbers in your report, Pleasant Ridge Exhibit 312, did Allison ask for strictly residential properties or total EAPs for the areas near wind farm turbines?
She asked about yes, One of the questions, have agricultural land assessed values changed in the footprint of the wind farm to a greater extent than the county as a whole? So that was one of the questions.
Was there a question that asked strictly for residential assessed values only?
There was a question, have residential assessed values changed in the footprint of the wind farm to a greater extent than the county as a whole? Have residential assessed values gone up or down in the footprint of the wind farm since it has come online? Have residential assessed values changed in the footprint of the wind farm to a greater extent than the county as a whole?
So those were the questions she was asking.
Those were some of the questions. There's about 9 or 10 questions focusing on what we thought would be relevant considering analysis as to the impact of these various counties that had these existing wind farms.
Okay, could you read for the record those 9 or 10 questions, please?
Sure. Are you familiar with the name of the wind farm in your county? Do you personally live within 3 miles of a wind turbine? If yes, approximately how far away is the nearest turbine? Overall, how would you describe the impacts of wind farms on property values in your county? See attached list of possible negative, positive impacts of wind farms. Have residential assessed values gone up or down in the footprint of the wind farm since it has come online? Have residential assessed values changed in the footprint of the wind farm to a greater extent than the county as a whole? Have agricultural land assessed values gone up or down in the footprint of the wind farm since it has come online? And agricultural land residential assessed values changed in the footprint of the wind farm to a greater extent than the county as a whole? Have property tax rates in the footprint of the wind farms gone up or down since the wind farms came online? Is there anything else about wind farms and assessed valuations in your county that we should know?
And could you read me the second or the third one? I think it's the overall, just read a little slower for me. I want to start overall.
Overall, how would you describe the impacts of wind farms on property values in your county?
In the county.
Yes.
In the entire county. Okay. Nothing further.
I didn't
Thank you.
say entire.
Thank you.
Other interested parties out there with some questions? You can state your name for us and go ahead.
Amber Severson.
Yeah, we hear one of us.
All right. Amber, you're represented by Mr. Luke Hans. He did your rebuttal for you. Anybody else out there not represented by Mr. Luke Hans? Hold on here, let me
Can I want to break this light from this one?
the top boxes.
Brad Steidinger.
Mr. Roos, you referenced a couple times tonight the economic conditions in 2008 to 2013.
I did.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you're referring to?
I am referring to basically the financial global U.S. meltdown starting in late 2008, which basically created havoc in the financial markets, made it very difficult for small businesses and mid-sized businesses to obtain financing, the inability of available lending for mortgages of all types, the concern among major corporations, and really job eliminations in major corporations, which created economic concerns, basically a tightening of the economy. It went further, probably 12 or 13. One of the several areas actually benefited, like with any type change in the economy. But some of the ag prices went up because of greater production and higher prices and export of product overseas. Then there was also benefit in the rail industry because of the fact of moving goods and services from China into the ports that came through the Midwest. So the intermodal in Elmwood, as an example, is one of the more successful intermodals in the country because it brings all the goods from China over here. And then the fracking, so to speak, which happened basically in West Texas in the Balkan oil fields, and particularly Balkan, because they're mainly liquid-based petroleum. They're bringing their product across even to the East Coast, which again for rail is providing benefits. So it wasn't all bad, but in general, it significantly hurt the real estate markets.
So all these things you mentioned would affect the home prices, basically.
Indirectly, one way or another, but I mean, then you go down into specific situations. If you have weakness with economic job growth, or you have population declines, that also has impact.
So there's trends out there that show what the home prices are doing. I mean, does the NRA put that out? Does the Census Bureau? Is there places you can find what the average home prices have been doing through that time period?
Yeah, we get information based on the census. It goes to demographics, it goes to income levels, household size, socioeconomic groups, and we get it all through something called Site to Do Business, or they get it from something called Claris. But it shows specific impacts, but it shows demographics and it shows population density, but it doesn't necessarily show home prices.
But it does use average sale price as a factor, correct?
It considers it, yes.
When you interviewed the assessors, or actually let me back up a minute, you talked about massive appraisals.
Yeah.
Mass appraisals.
Yeah.
And I, as Mr. Blazer asked me when I testified, I said I did not do a mass appraisal, that's not what this was. When you interviewed the assessors, did you ask them to provide a mass appraisal?
I didn't engage them to do any appraisal work, so the answer is no. I think you heard my question.
So they didn't provide any kind of appraisal report to you of any sort?
Well, actually, the assessor from Vermilion County did provide a reaction and an opinion on value in regard to something that he had been quoted with, and he actually sent me a letter in regard to that issue, and it's not something that I push. So this is Matt Long, who's the assessor for Vermilion County, and basically said that he has come to his attention. There are 2 appraisals I completed for a house in rural Filfin that has been used to imply the new wind farm in Pyle Township has had a negative impact on value in the area. And I can read the whole thing, but he says, what I can tell you is at this time, the second most recent appraisal, the wind farm was only still in the discussion phase and nothing had been finalized or had any construction begun. To imply the decrease in value had anything to do with the existence of the wind farm is completely false and misleading. The decrease in value was a result of the overall economy. I would challenge anyone to produce a copy of the second appraisal I completed and referenced anywhere in the report that indicates the decrease in value was a result of a proposed wind farm that didn't exist at the time of the report. He's got a longer letter than that. But
So you accept this report as a mass appraisal that meets the standards of the appraisal?
Absolutely not. He's reacting to an allegation. I do not have an appraisal, and I've actually got a couple of copies that are redacted that really don't tell you much. But I have information that he sent me because we were interviewing the assessors and this information came up. And he was the one that was on vacation when we made the original call, and he called back and said, oh, by the way, I've got this issue going.
Yeah, I don't have all the information that was presented tonight. Did you present a mass appraisal for Legacy County on this project?
Me? No.
You did not?
No.
Did you provide any appraisal at all?
I did not.
Okay. So the difference in result is just an opinion, it's not based on any kind of appraisal?
It's based on my appraisal experience of almost 40 years and 11,000 properties, and looking at the data and the information, and mine was basically looking at what Mike McCann did, commenting on that and providing this additional information.
Okay, no more questions.
I believe I had another question, Carolyn. To that microphone.
Carolyn Zerling, Illinois. You testified about amenities and disamenities.
Yes.
Can you, in non-technical terms, briefly define what they are?
Amenity, generally, for residential, would obviously be quality infrastructure. And it would be being by an attractive feature such as a lake, a river, wooded areas, a golf course, quality school systems. A disamenity would probably be a landfill, prison, a quarry, potentially a major interstate.
And is the point of that an amenity would tend to increase the value of a nearby home?
Properly done, yes.
And a disamenity would tend to depress, compared to a comparable home, not in proximity to that disamenity.
Correct.
And you just indicated that one of the things you listed as a disamenity was a landfill.
I did.
Have you ever heard of a real estate, a real property expert named Peter Paletti?
I have.
And are you aware of his opinions on landfills?
Mr. Chairman, way beyond the scope.
Yeah. Let's try to focus your questions on the evidence that you presented in Act 12 for us, please.
All right, one of the questions you asked the assessors was whether or not they lived within 3 miles of a wind farm. Is that correct?
I need to get the exact question. Yes.
How did you pick that number, 3 miles?
Just to see if they were anywhere approximate to a wind turbine.
How did you pick 3 miles?
If I recall, that might have been the outside number in Mr. McCann's allegation as to diminution of value. It's getting late. I'm not sure, but he had a very outside number as to distance, and I think that was the reason.
Okay. Would assessors, did you ask the assessors about abandoned homes?
That would have been under one of the general questions if there were any extraordinary issues, but I don't think we came out with direct questions as to abandoned homes, no.
Abandoned homes wouldn't impact the reported values or diminution in values, would they? Because there's no sale there, correct?
Actually, a high preponderance of unkept and abandoned homes, in my opinion, would have a negative impact, which would trickle down to probably having a negative impact on values. If the abandoned homes weren't sold, yes, there would be no sale transactions, but they could impact the area.
They could, but you didn't ask that question, did you?
Specifically, no.
Could one property make a big difference in an average, if you would have average values? In other words, if you're taking the average of a set of data, if there's one big outlier, high or low, that will affect the numeric average, will it not?
Depending on the set, but yes.
Okay.
And I mean, but if you go mean, median, mode, it might not, but the answer is generally it could.
Did you determine whether the very high-priced property in the Twin Groves project had any kind of connection whatsoever with the wind company there?
I've been asked that. On my understanding, they did not.
Did you actually ask the owners?
I did not ask the owners, but we asked the assessor, who seemed to be very familiar with that property.
Are you aware the wind farm company there actually owns an observation property there?
Objection. Silverspec's not in evidence, no, she's testified, she's not asking the question.
All right, we'll allow this objection.
That's all I have.
All right. Anybody else in the audience with questions not represented by Mr. Luganese? Anybody out there? All right. DBA, do we have any other questions? Anything? County staff, county council? All right. Thank you, Mr. Burke.
I have a little bit of a mess here. Maybe a couple minutes.
That'll be fine. That'll be fine. I think that's 10. So I think we need a motion to recess. Need a motion to recess?
I'll make that.
Bits and motions. Take a second. All right, items and seconds. All in favor? Opposed? Just the other quick note, Tuesday, May 12th at 6:30 for our next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask,
And it will be here.
the only witness we have left in rebuttal is Mr. Parzak. I expect his direct to take roughly 10 minutes. We've asked a couple of times now for Mr. Luganese to identify who he intends to call in server level. Now that we've gone through the three aspects of knowing Mr. Parzak, given that we'll be done with Mr. Parzak very quickly Tuesday morning, I think it's important that we learn who else is going to be here on Tuesday.
I can tell you who the possibilities are without having heard Mr. Parzak's testimony, obviously, not in the reason to testify to. But as to the three witnesses we've heard so far, the four people that I know who may testify are John Slagle, Brad Steiger, Jerry Punt, Mike McCann, and then my understanding is John Hayes, who I do not represent, also wishes to possibly take Survey, and I have no idea about the other 20 people who are that I don't represent. That's what I know of that are possibilities for Tuesday.
I wouldn't